He didn't come from politics. Politics came to him. He didn't sound like a president. He sounded like a businessman who was sick and tired of losing. He didn't read from carefully prepared scripts. He spoke off the cuff. It was messy, confident, and completely unfiltered, and people loved him for it. He said the things others were too afraid to say. He pointed fingers. He named enemies, and by the time anyone even tried to stop him, millions of his followers no longer cared whether he was protecting them or simply fighting for himself. Some people call him a savior. Others call him a danger to democracy itself. But the real question is far more personal than that. If you had been there, in the middle of that crowd, wearing the hat, chanting the slogan, would you have followed him too? To understand how this happened, you have to understand the world he stepped into. He appeared when trust was already dead. People didn't just wake up one day and hate the system. It was a slow burn, a resentment that grew over years. They watched factories close down, jobs disappear, and promises get broken time and time again. They were constantly told the economy was fine, even while their own lives were visibly falling apart. And then he stepped onto the stage. He didn't present himself as another politician. He presented himself as a winner. A man who said, "I know how to make deals, I know how to win, and I know exactly who has been cheating you." He wasn't interested in talking about complex policy details. He talked about something much simpler: losers and winners. And he made one thing crystal clear: you were not a loser. They were. His language was his most powerful weapon. He spoke in short sentences, used simple words, and made bold, sweeping claims. There was no room for nuance, no space for apologies. The media laughed at him. The experts dismissed him as a clown. And with every attack, he only grew stronger, because every single criticism just proved his central point. They hate me because I fight for you. Suddenly, facts became secondary. Emotion became everything. He wasn't trying to convince people with charts and data. He was activating something already inside them. He told them, "You're not stupid, you're not wrong. You have been robbed." And once people feel like they've been robbed, they don't want calm explanations. They want revenge. In this new landscape, anger didn't divide the crowd. It unified it. His rallies felt different from anything that came before. They were loud, electric, and deeply personal. He didn't just speak to the crowd, he spoke with them. He would start a slogan, and they would finish his sentences. That collective chant wasn't just a sign of support. It was a declaration of belonging. And for millions of people who had felt invisible for years, finally being seen felt like pure power. He often reminded them that he didn't need the job, he didn't need the money, and he certainly didn't need anyone's approval. "I'm only doing this for you." History loves that line. It's a phrase that has been used by powerful figures for centuries. A key that unlocks incredible loyalty. Soon, a new reality began to set in. This was the normalization of chaos. Rules that once seemed absolute became flexible. Institutions that were the bedrock of the country were now seen as obstacles. Any form of criticism was reframed as betrayal. Journalists were no longer watchdogs holding power accountable. They were the enemies of the people. Courts were no longer neutral arbiters of justice. They were political tools. Anyone who dared to question him was immediately accused of hating the country. Psychologists have a term for this phenomenon: identity fusion. It's the point where criticizing the leader feels like a personal attack on the people themselves. Your identity becomes completely merged with his. At that point, logic and reason no longer work. Only loyalty does. He never once claimed to be a perfect man. He claimed to be a necessary one. Every controversy had a ready-made excuse. Every scandal had a designated villain. Every single failure had someone else to blame. He didn't tell people to trust the system. In fact, he told them the system was rigged. Instead, he said, "Trust me." And millions did. Because, in times of great uncertainty, confidence can easily be mistaken for competence. So, why did it all work so well? Extensive research in social psychology shows that during periods of high cultural and economic anxiety, people naturally gravitate toward dominant, authoritarian personalities. It's not because these leaders are kind or compassionate. It's because they appear strong. And that perceived strength promises safety, even if it comes at a steep price. Once a sense of fear becomes a permanent part of daily life, the very idea of freedom can start to feel risky and dangerous. That's the critical moment when people stop asking, "Is this the right thing to do?" and start asking, "Is this winning?" Let's be clear, there was a cost. Yes, he energized those who felt forgotten. Yes, he completely disrupted a political system many saw as broken. And yes, he made people feel proud again. But while all that was happening, something essential was quietly eroding. Trust in the very concept of truth. Respect for limits on power. The graceful acceptance of losing, which is fundamental to a functioning democracy. Everything became a battle. Every election outcome was questioned. Every loss was immediately framed as theft. The country didn't just split along political lines. It split emotionally. The divisions became deeper, more personal, and harder to heal. Years later, when one reporter asked him if he would do it all again, he just smiled and said, "They were already broken when I arrived." And maybe that's true. But that statement reveals the core of the entire dilemma. Because when leaders see chaos not as a problem to be solved, but as permission to act without restraint, there is no limit to what they can justify. The line between a savior and a dictator is not drawn by laws on paper. It is drawn by personal restraint. Men like this don't rise in strong, confident societies. They rise in tired ones. They find success in societies that feel ignored, mocked, and left behind. They don't create the anger that fuels their movement. They simply find it, and then they channel it for their own purposes. So the final question isn't whether he was right or wrong. The real question is this: when the next person comes along and promises to fix everything, who are you willing to give that power to? Thanks for watching. If this story made you think, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world. We'll see you in the next one.